My goal today is to talk about the desktop as a service, the DaaS space, in a very real sense. As Cappy mentioned earlier, one of the key areas we do a lot of work in and a lot of research in is the end user computing. And we've been talking about the infrastructure all day, so a little bit of a shift into the end user space. And one of the things clients are starting to ask about is, I don't want to buy infrastructure anymore. I still haven't gone to VDI yet. Why don't I just put it in the cloud? And that's a great question, and you start to look at some of the solutions and see what they can and they can't do, and you start to learn a lot of interesting things. So focusing on the use cases, I want to kind of dive into what is real today and save a lot of the speculation about what's coming for later, because frankly, one of my coworkers was at VMware Partner Technical Advisory Board 2 days ago. I purposely did not ask him anything that happened in that end-user focused session because obviously I can't talk about it, but I also don't want to risk talking about it. And I know that when I ask him following this, most of what I talk about right now will probably be already different. So that's kind of the first thing to keep in mind is this is a rapidly changing race to the bottom, and everything is going to change quickly. We talk about end-user computing as a strategy. We don't focus solely on VDI. These are just some of the buzzwords you hear out there. But the strategy is so much more than just the desktop. Bring your own device is plaguing everybody. The Dropbox problem we just heard about. So enterprise file sync and share. And just even things like application virtualization, which has been around for a long time. How does that play into the current strategy? So you have to really kind of wrap yourselves around all of those aspects. And the key about desktop as a service is it is just another tool in that tool belt, another thing to address some of these use cases. So things that are kind of common in the DaaS space, like any cloud offering we've talked about all day, it provides that predictive cost model. So you know very clearly what you're going to spend and how quickly you're going to spend it. It definitely facilitates the anytime, any device, anywhere access. That's just a core of the cloud itself. Everyone's probably heard of Brian Madden. He's a great technologist out there. He sort of put this arbitrary number of about 500 desktops. He thinks that if you just have about 500 desktops virtualized, why wouldn't you put them in the cloud? Because I guarantee you Amazon can do it cheaper and more available. And the reason they do that is the shared infrastructure economies of scale. So that's what you're leveraging in the DaaS market. That's how you get the cost benefits. Another thing we see is service adoption and enablement kind of pacing each other. One of the sort of things we've been encumbered by over the years in IT is purchase cycles, capital budgeting cycles. And VDI comes along, or VUC comes along and can scale very quickly, especially if it's successful like we all hope it is. What happens if you need another 500 or 1,000 users and you're between capital cycles? This can be a tool to address that because I can scale exactly how many users I need and pay by the month or something similar. And just lastly, kind of like I said, you're scaling with clicks, not purchase orders. So it's extreme agility. Common themes to look for. Offering a simple desktop is table stakes at this point. We've been doing that ourselves, and that's kind of the base offering. So start looking at what other services, if you go through a partner, they can add value. Other folks can add additional services around some of those buzzwords, things like mobile device management piece, the application virtualization piece. So there's add-ons that can add more value than just providing a desktop. Not that that isn't great as well. And then, like I said earlier, prices continue to race to the bottom, and the space is rapidly changing. So a little bit of split responsibility. Like any cloud solution, the service provider is going to manage the hardware, the hypervisor, basically anything outside of the Windows OS. And licensing kind of varies. I put it on both sides because there are models where the cost includes Windows. You can bring your own Windows. Sometimes they include Office. Sometimes you can bring your own. And then obviously any of your own applications would be kind of on you for licensing. So that's why it's split. Kind of you as the customer, you have to focus on network integration if you choose to do so. You could certainly set up a kind of isolated environment if that was useful, but in most cases you want the cloud desktops to get back to your own applications. So VRFs for layer 3, VLANs for layer 2, how do you extend that and how do you kind of address that stuff? As Loring talked about in the Amazon piece, how you manage users is important because View services offer a way to manage users. So a common way, and quite frankly the best way usually, is to use your own directory services like Active Directory because you have the users and groups already, so it becomes much easier to entitle and to give people the desktops. You also manage gold images, so just the base image builds and then what sort of base software pieces you want on top of that. Obviously, we all try to shrink the number of gold images we need. That's kind of one of the holy grails in virtual end user computing. But so you still have to manage that. So to that end, you kind of want to minimize those. And then just applications. So the mantra, again, is the service provider will manage everything outside of the desktop. You have to take responsibility for everything inside the desktop. So, for example, a lot of the providers will turn on basic Windows software update services. If you want to use your own policies around how you patch, it's on you to kind of put those in place. This is our kind of cloud tenant slide. I just wanted to draw the fact that, this is another cloud offering, right? It needs to be anytime access on any device. It needs to scale up, and it also needs to scale down. That's critical. Automation is a little bit table stakes for VDI because we've been doing that internally for years, but it needs to continue. And it just needs to provide that kind of shared environment so that I can reduce my cost of ownership. So why would I do this? Some of the things we hear, a major one is, I have virtual desktops on premise, but I want to get out of the infrastructure business. It's a separate kind of siloed infrastructure, and it takes a team of people to manage, and there at certain scales may be use cases where somebody like Amazon or VMware can do it cheaper and maybe even more available. Another kind of reason there's still plenty of people that haven't gotten into VDI yet, so you may be cautiously optimistic and just are looking for a way, again, to John and Loring's point, to get in with little risk. Amazon, for example, Workspaces, you can start with as few as one single desktop and terminate that anytime you want. So there's extreme flexibility there. And then just the other one is we go into a lot of these workshops and we find there's certain use cases that just are difficult to address. And every time that happens and there's a reason to keep that use case on physical hardware, it kind of erodes that cost model. It becomes more difficult to make EUC cost effective. So having another tool like this to be able to address some of those yet unaddressable use cases is another benefit. Just a couple use cases. Obviously, there are many, many more than this, but a couple that we hear a lot and I think play into the DaaS space nicely. One is the task worker, by virtue of them generally only requiring an email client and a browser. A lot of times they're offshore, remote location, they come and go quickly. This is a great one to spin up and spin down very quickly and not have a lot to worry about from a management sense. We run across the graphics use case a lot. VMware added the ability to virtualize a GPU, so I think of like AutoCAD folks that you're buying precision workstations that have the Grid K1 or K2 cards. Those are several $1,000s per workstation. Some of these solutions provide a way to virtualize that solution in the cloud so that you're not spending money on those high-performance workstations, especially as you have lots of engineers and they want to work from home and things like that. Disaster recovery is huge. This one comes up all the time, and DR is a little tough in a end-user computing space because up until now, the providers don't really provide a good way to get your data back up in another data center. So if you're non-persistent, it's generally about making sure their users' personal data is synchronized, and then you have a pool of resources, and you spin up new VMs and attach that personal data to each VM so that the user can get working again. The problem with that is you kind of need that hardware sitting there in the other data center, and then people start looking at how can I kind of balance workloads and use both. The DaaS space provides an attractive alternative, right? Because I don't need to have that hardware. I can simply synchronize my user persona data. I can make sure I'm ready to swipe that credit card and spin up those desktops. And if I have a disaster, suddenly I can get people back online very quickly. And then kind of like I was talking about earlier, the buffer capacity issue. If I'm between purchase cycles, it's extremely easy to get more capacity very quickly. I hope nobody comes and finds me after and has an issue with the slide. There are obviously many, many DaaS players out there, but I kind of boil it down to these four because a lot of the solutions, even through partners, run some subset of these. They're kind of just abstracting the management of it for you. So I will talk about all three. I'll talk about on-premises. I'll talk about one of these guys hosted through a third-party provider, and I'll talk about sort of the latest and greatest, which is these manufacturers themselves hosting the desktop for you. So first of all, VMware Horizon Dad came out about a week before Amazon, which was an interesting twist of the knife. It's basically the acquisition of the Deskstone platform, which was last November, I believe. So these are VMware-delivered desktops on vCloud Hybrid Service, which we talked about earlier. They can be persistent, they can be non-persistent. They are, as far as I know, the only company that has sort of gotten around the Microsoft licensing challenges. So they offer both server-based desktops that are skinned to look like desktops, and they also offer the native desktop OS installed by giving dedicated hardware. They're very scalable, it's very predictable. You can start with as few as 50 desktops and basically do 1 or 2 or 3 year engagements from there. What's very interesting is the desk tone of the Horizon Dad solution can be basically done yourself on-premise, which is not to be confused with Horizon View. Those are two separate platforms. People have started asking questions, why would they have both of those? Folks at VMware would say, it's not that we're going to merge the two, but it is probably true that we don't see a need to have two products doing the same thing. So personally, I'm anxious and interested to see kind of how the Horizon View and Horizon DAS on-prem sort of develop. But assuming you're using Horizon DAS on-prem, you can use a cloud provider to burst to. The connection broker can span physical sites. So I can have desktops that, or users rather, that can log into a single broker and get desktops in either location without really knowing or caring. So just kind of some interesting, unique things about it. Very, very simple, architectural slide. I just wanted to point out, you're creating a VPN connection to vCloud Hybrid Service. So you can tie back into your corporate AD. You can store your persona data. And then corporate users can get access just like remote users can. So there's multiple ways in, and it kind of builds the security posture as well. Citrix is interesting. They are both very mature in the DAS space and also somewhat immature. And what I mean by that is today, Citrix will not host desktops for you. However, they have a huge ecosystem of partners that will do it. And why they're so mature is because those partners host the Citrix platform stack with all of its aspects, right? So it's not just a desktop. You can get them to host your mobility solution. You can get them to host your EFSS, file sync and share via ShareFile. And they'll kind of host and manage all of these solutions a partner will on behalf of you. And you pay the partner, not Citrix. One thing that is coming, I would call it vaporware, and I think many would agree at this point, was just announced about 4 weeks ago, is that Citrix is going to start hosting management components in Azure and running them for you. So essentially, you can have the management components of Citrix kind of hosted for you, and it wouldn't matter if your various infrastructure components are on-premises, in the cloud. They can kind of be anywhere and sort of have this unified management. Now, nobody's actually seen it yet, so it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out, but it does sound really interesting. And then in terms of Citrix themselves hosting desktops, no one can really say yet. So we'll have to wait and see. Amazon Workspaces was announced at reInvent last year and went live in March. It's unique because it is a Windows desktop hosted entirely on the Amazon stack. So a lot of the stuff that Lauren talked about earlier. The benefit there is I can use the same predictive cost models and scalability and AMIs that EC2 gives me. If I have persistent desktops, they get stored on EBS, Elastic Block Store. And at multiple times, although they don't tell us how often, throughout the day, desktops are backed up to S3. And I think that desktop backup thing is something people are asking for a lot these days. So it's a great way to gain that functionality. And then the other aspect is it can be placed inside of an Amazon VPC, right? So I can connect my on-premises resources, my directory services, my applications in a very secure way. Or even using Direct Connect to get the desktops in the cloud back to the campus. They're very, very much capacity on demand. You can literally start with one desktop. It takes as long as if you have an account, you log in and it's like 3 steps. It's ridiculous. So if you want to try it, it's definitely worthwhile. And then they have, in terms of their kind of licensing models, everyone really kind of has a standard and advanced or a standard and performance, which is sort of the 1x2 and the 2x4 for resources. Amazon took it a step further and they introduced a plus version of each of those where they include your Office licensing. So Office licensing is one we hear a lot of customers. It can be a pain to manage. So you can bring it yourself, or in Amazon's case, they can take care of it for you. And just that, like I said, backup to S3 gives it 11 nines of durability. So there's something to be said there for that availability profile. Very simple diagram, again, showing your workspaces backing up to S3. It shows the VPN connection. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Microsoft, although their solution is probably the least developed right now. So it's codenamed Mohoro, and AKA Remote App. And in a sentence, what it really is the redesign of remote desktop services. Today, the technical preview I downloaded on my laptop, I tried it out. It's basically, I run the Office stack as a server application, very similar to XenApp. So I do see it playing against XenApp in that respect. No full virtual desktop today. It remains to be seen if they'll give full desktops, but I think the key is going to be being able to host my applications on Windows Server in Azure and sort of doing the application as a service. So again, keep your eye on this one. There's really not much today, but it is something worth looking at. So another use case for DaaS is proof of concept. We talked earlier about how easy and low risk it is to get in and test. So one of the things I'd recommend is pick any of these solutions and try them out. I believe all of them have a free trial, with the exception maybe of Amazon, but you can start one of those for a day and it'll cost you like 4 cents. You can attempt both to kind of wrap your head around what VDI is if you haven't really gotten started, but you can also say, man, I have this use case I've been looking to solve for a long time. It happens to fit really nicely in a DaaS model. I'm going to try it out. Get a few users and have them try it. It really is easy to get in and out of. The other side of the coin is if you already have VDI or virtual end user computing on premises, there's still a place for a DaaS tool. It's just another way to deliver the service. And I think it bears looking at, again, for those hard to reach use cases or for use cases where they can perhaps do it cheaper and better. So again, talk to us. I'll be around and I'm happy to share kind of our experiences. My counterparts I'll introduce you to as well, same deal. So interesting space. I did want to throw these in here, and I purposely did it at the end because I know if I switch off them too quickly, people will get angry with me. So I have VMware and Amazon, and I just wanted to show basically the two offerings. Whether you go, whichever manufacturer you go with, they look pretty similar to this, but check out the list price. Again, this is a list price, $35 per desktop per month. That's a pretty good entry point and a pretty cost-effective way to deliver services in some cases. Amazon, same deal. The only difference with Amazon, or one of the main differences with Amazon, is they offer more memory. Just because they're on top of EC2, so they're using sort of several-year-old EC2 instance sizes. They just pick those and associated the cost with that.